Picture this. You're at a backyard barbecue, talking to your buddy who just bought a new truck, just refinanced his house to put in a pool, and is casually mentioning he's thinking about leasing a boat this summer. And on the outside, you're nodding, smiling, saying, "That's awesome, man." But on the inside, you're doing quiet math. You're thinking, wait, how is he doing all of this? Because you make decent money. You're not blowing it on crazy stuff. You do everything you're supposed to do. But somehow, at the end of every month, there's just not much left. And that feeling, that quiet, low-grade frustration of doing the right things, but not actually getting ahead, that feeling is exactly why I made this video.
My name is Nico, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and why some people with average incomes end up building serious wealth, while high earners stay completely stuck their entire lives. If this video helps you see money differently, and I genuinely believe it will, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give it a thumbs up, because I put a lot into these, and it means more than you know.
Now, here's what I want you to understand going into this. Most people, when they think about who's going to be wealthy, they picture a type. They picture someone who went to the right school, got the right job, maybe had a little family money, drives a nice car, lives in the right neighborhood. They think wealth is this personality type or this resume. And that's the trap. Because wealth isn't a resume. Wealth is a pattern. It's a collection of specific habits and behaviors that, when you zoom out and look at the math, almost mathematically guarantee a certain outcome. And the crazy part? Most of these habits have almost nothing to do with how much money you make. They have everything to do with how you relate to money, how you think about it, how you make decisions with it, and how your identity is shaped around it.
So in this video, I'm going to walk you through 8 specific signs, 8 behaviors, 8 mindset patterns that, if you already have them or you're building them right now, statistically put you on a path that most people around you will never walk. And I'm going to show you why, psychologically and mathematically, these things matter so much. Because a lot of people have 1 or 2 of them. The people who have 6, 7, 8 of them, those are the people who quietly become wealthy over 10 or 15 years, and everyone around them acts shocked, like it came out of nowhere. It didn't come out of nowhere. It was always the pattern. Let's start with the first sign, and this one is going to sting a little for some people.
Sign number 1. You have a clear, uncomfortable gap between what you earn and what you spend. Not a comfortable gap, not a "I'm saving a little bit" gap, an uncomfortable one. Think about it this way. If your savings rate doesn't feel slightly aggressive, it's probably not aggressive enough. Studies on long-term wealth accumulation are pretty consistent on this. The people who build meaningful net worth aren't just saving the leftovers at the end of the month. They're treating savings like a non-negotiable bill. It comes out first, before lifestyle gets a chance to absorb it. The psychological term for what happens when you don't do this is called lifestyle creep. And it is one of the most silently devastating forces in personal finance. Every time your income goes up, your lifestyle expands to meet it, often slightly faster than your income actually grew. And you end up on this treadmill that moves faster and faster, but never takes you anywhere.
Here's where it gets really interesting. There's research from behavioral economists that shows most people, when asked what income level would make them financially comfortable, say about 20% more than I make right now. And what's wild is that number stays relatively constant no matter what they actually make. Someone making $50,000 says $70. Someone making $200,000 says $250. It's a moving goalpost. And the people who are going to be wealthy, genuinely wealthy, they figured out at some point that the goalpost is a lie. So they stopped chasing it and started playing a completely different game. They picked a number for their lifestyle, they capped it, and then they let their savings rate grow with their income instead of their spending. That gap, that uncomfortable gap, that's the engine of everything.
Sign number 2. You think about the opportunity cost of every major decision, not just the price tag. Most people look at a car payment and think, can I afford $650 a month? That's the wrong question. The wealthy in the making person looks at that same car and thinks, what am I actually giving up? And when you start doing the real math on that, when you take $650 a month, invested over 10 years at a reasonable market return, we're talking about somewhere between $100,000 and $120,000 sitting on the other side of that decision. Not gone, just traded for a car that will be worth maybe $11,000 in 10 years. Most people have no idea that every major financial decision is actually a fork in the road, where one path ends in a depreciating asset and the other ends in a compounding one. And compounding is not a concept, it's a force. It's why Einstein allegedly called it the eighth wonder of the world, though whether he actually said that is debated. But the math isn't. A dollar invested at 25 becomes a very different thing at 55 than a dollar invested at 35 becomes at 55. We're talking about more than double the outcome from a 10-year head start. That's not motivational content. That's arithmetic. Sign number 3, you are obsessed with your earning potential, not just your current salary. Here's the thing about people who end up wealthy. They almost universally, at some point, made a deliberate investment in themselves that paid off asymmetrically. And I don't mean an expensive degree necessarily. I mean they identified a skill, a credential, a network, a niche, something, and they poured disproportionate time and energy into it during a window where most people were coasting. They took the certification. They read the books. They put in the extra hours to get the promotion that nobody else wanted to work for. And the reason this matters mathematically is staggering.
Think about it this way. The difference between someone who earns $60,000 a year for their career and someone who earns $90,000 for the same career isn't $30,000. Across a 30-year career, accounting for raises and investing the difference, the gap is often $1 million or more. One decision to develop a marketable skill, one investment in your own earning trajectory. That's the difference between a comfortable retirement and a stressful one. The person who's going to be wealthy is never just thinking about this month's paycheck. They're thinking about what they're worth in 3 years and what actions they need to take today to get there. Sign number 4, you have a deeply healthy relationship with delayed gratification. And I know, that sounds like every generic financial advice article you've ever read. But stick with me here, because the psychology underneath this is actually fascinating. There's a concept in behavioral psychology called hyperbolic discounting, which is a fancy way of saying our brains are literally wired to overvalue what we can have right now and undervalue what we could have in the future. This isn't a character flaw. It's a survival mechanism left over from when our ancestors needed to grab food when they found it because there might not be food tomorrow. But here's the part that will blow your mind. That same brain chemistry that kept your great-great-great-grandfather alive in a resource-scarce environment is actively working against your financial future in a world of abundance. Your brain treats spending money today and investing it for 30 years as if they're roughly equal choices. They are absolutely not equal choices. And the people who figured out how to override that wiring, not perfectly, not like robots, but consistently, they have a massive neurological edge over everyone else. Sound familiar? You felt the pull to buy something you didn't need, justified it with some version of, I deserve it, and then quietly wondered why you're not making more financial progress. That's hyperbolic discounting doing its thing. The sign that you're on the right path isn't that you never feel that pull. It's that you've built systems and habits that win against it most of the time. Sign number 5, you do not have consumer debt that you're comfortable with. I want to be very specific here. I'm not saying you've never had debt. I'm saying you are deeply viscerally uncomfortable with carrying high-interest consumer debt. Credit card balances, personal loans for things that didn't appreciate, buy now, pay later schemes for stuff you already used. Because here's the math. The average credit card interest rate right now is hovering somewhere around 20 to 22% in the United States. Let that land for a second. The long-term average annual return of the S&P 500 is roughly 10%. So when you're carrying a credit card balance, you are not just spending money on interest. You are essentially paying 22% to borrow money in an environment where the best available return on that same money is roughly 10%. That is a guaranteed negative outcome. It's not speculation, it is math. And what's remarkable, and honestly a little heartbreaking, is how normalized this is. The average American household with credit card debt carries somewhere between $6,000 and $9,000 in balances. That's not an emergency. That's just Tuesday for a lot of people. The person who is going to be wealthy doesn't see it as Tuesday. They see it as a financial emergency that gets handled before anything else, because they understand at a bone-deep level that you can't build wealth at 10% while hemorrhaging money at 22%. Here's where it gets really interesting, because sign 6 is one that almost nobody talks about. Sign number 6. You have what I call walking away money, or at minimum, you're building it intentionally. Walking away money is an emergency fund, but it's bigger than that. It's the financial backstop that changes how you make every single decision in your life. Think about it this way. When you have 3, 4, 6 months of expenses sitting in a high-yield savings account, something psychological happens. It's not just that you're protected from a car repair or a job loss, though you are. It's that your entire relationship to risk and negotiation changes. You can walk away from a bad job. You can negotiate a better salary because you can actually afford for the negotiation to go badly. You can say no to a client who's underpaying you. You can take a calculated risk on a business idea or a career move. Without walking away money, every decision you make is made from scarcity. And decisions made from scarcity are almost always bad decisions. There's cortisol involved, your stress hormone. And research consistently shows that financial stress doesn't just make you feel bad, it literally impairs your cognitive function. It narrows your thinking. It makes you short-term in a way that compounds over time into exactly the kind of financial trap you're trying to escape. The person who's going to be wealthy understands that liquidity isn't dead money. It's the thing that makes every other decision cleaner, smarter, and more profitable. Sign number 7, you invest automatically and you don't touch it. This one sounds simple. It is not simple. Here's the thing. Most people know they should invest. Most people intend to invest. But there is a massive behavioral gap between intention and execution. And the people who cross that gap consistently are the ones who took the decision-making out of the equation entirely. They set up automatic contributions to a 401k, a Roth IRA, a brokerage account, whatever their vehicle is, and it moves without them having to feel motivated about it every single month. Because motivation is unreliable. Motivation is high when the market is up and everyone's talking about stocks. Motivation disappears when the market drops 15% and your balance looks scary and your brain is screaming at you to do something.
And here's the brutal truth about market timing. Study after study, and I mean this consistently across decades of research, shows that missing even the 10 best trading days in a decade can cut your long-term returns nearly in half. People who try to get in and out of the market based on how they feel, they almost always miss exactly those days. Because those best days almost always happen in periods of maximum fear and uncertainty, right after a big drop. The person who is going to be wealthy has automated their wealth-building process to the point where their emotions don't get a vote. The money moves, the investments happen, and they let time do the one thing humans are genuinely terrible at:
waiting patiently for compound interest to work.
Most people have no idea how violent the compounding math actually gets once it gets going. Let me give you a real number. If you invest $500 a month, starting at age 25, and you earn an average return of 9%, which is slightly below the historical average, by age 65, you have approximately $2.3 million. Not because you're a genius, not because you picked the right stocks, because you put $500 a month into an index fund and you left it alone for 40 years. The total amount you actually contributed? Around $240,000. The market did the other $2 million. But, and this is critical, if you wait 10 years and start at 35 instead of 25, that same $500 a month gets you closer to $920,000. You contributed the same percentage of years, but you ended up with less than half the money. That is not a small difference. That is the cost of waiting. That is why the 8th sign might be the most important one of all.
Sign number 8. You started. Or you're starting now. And I don't mean this as a soft, feel-good close. I mean it mechanically. The single biggest predictor of long-term wealth isn't your income, your education, your zip code, or your parents' financial situation. It's when you began behaving like someone who builds wealth. Because every month you wait is not a neutral decision. It's a decision that costs you something real. The boulder on a hill analogy is used a lot, but it's used a lot because it's accurate. Pushing a boulder up a hill is hard. Getting it to the top and letting it roll is effortless. Wealth has that same physics. The accumulation phase is the hard part. The years of building the gap, automating the investments, resisting lifestyle creep, killing the consumer debt. But once you cross certain thresholds, and this is what nobody prepares you for, it starts to feel easy. Your investments generate more than you contribute. Your emergency fund earns meaningful interest. Your net worth grows even in months where you didn't do anything special. The people who get to that point did not get there because they had exceptional circumstances. They got there because they started behaving like someone who builds wealth before they felt like they had enough money to do it. And here's the behavioral shift I want you to sit with. The gap between people who build wealth and people who don't is often not income. It's identity. The person who is going to be wealthy thinks of themselves as someone who builds wealth. It's not something they aspire to be eventually. It's something they already are, right now, at whatever income level they're at. And that identity shapes every decision in 1,000 small, invisible ways. They round up on the savings contribution. They think twice on the impulse purchase. They read the book, take the course, negotiate the raise. Not because they're particularly disciplined robots, but because it's consistent with who they believe they are. Now, I want to give you a few honest warnings here, because I would be doing you a disservice if I made this sound like a tidy list without acknowledging the real friction. Don't think you need to have all 8 of these perfectly locked in to be on the right path. Most people who end up wealthy were a mess on 3 or 4 of these for years before they figured it out. The direction matters more than the current position. Are you moving toward a larger gap between income and spending? Moving toward eliminating consumer debt? Moving toward automating investments? That trajectory is what matters. Where you are today is just the starting line. Don't use this as a comparison tool against other people. The backyard barbecue guy with the truck and the pool, you don't know his full balance sheet. You don't know what's behind the curtain. Comparison is the enemy of financial clarity because you're always measuring someone else's highlight reel against your full budget spreadsheet. The only comparison that matters is you versus the version of you that makes one more good decision this week than last week. And don't let the math paralyze you. I gave you big numbers, 2,900,000, And I know that can feel simultaneously inspiring and completely abstract when you're living paycheck to paycheck or just getting started. So let me bring it back to ground level. The math works at every size. The habits matter at every income level. You don't need $100,000 to start. You need the next paycheck and the decision to do something different with even 10% of it. Look, these 8 signs aren't going to make you rich overnight. There's no version of this that skips the years in the middle. But what they will do, what they're already doing if you recognize yourself in even a few of them, is fundamentally change your financial trajectory in a way that most people around you will never experience. Because most people will keep chasing the lifestyle without ever building the foundation underneath it. They'll keep financing the illusion of wealth instead of building the actual thing. And 10, 15, 20 years from now, they'll wonder why they never got ahead. You're watching this video. You're asking the questions. You're thinking about this stuff seriously. That alone puts you ahead of more people than you realize. The person you're becoming through these habits is worth more than any specific dollar amount. Start building that foundation today, because your future self is counting on the decision you make right now. Hit that subscribe button if this video gave you something real. Drop a comment and tell me which of these 8 signs you're already working on, because I read every single one of them. And I'll see you in the next one.